What's up NBA fans, Dom2K on the mic, and to be honest, I've kind of neglected making this video for a while because I feel like I've talked about these points in one way or another in at least like 3 or 4 different videos. So there was the video that I made that was specifically about the history of super teams, there was one about LeBron James and Kevin Durant and comparing their decisions, and even in the video, probably about 2 videos back, I mentioned about how the super team thing came about because that's the talk these days. With Kevin Durant on the Warriors, there's a whole thing about who joined the super team when and who built one and who did it right and who did it wrong. And all that talk spiced up after LeBron James in his press conference after the NBA Finals said that he'd never played on a super team. And then there's today where Draymond Green gets on stage during the championship celebration and basically says LeBron started the whole super team trend. And although I've made a fair share of videos discussing something about super teams, I've never really made an opinionated one on what's gone on basically since the start of this decade, so that's what I wanted to do today. First off, I want to say that there's absolutely no way if you look through NBA history that you could say LeBron James started the super team thing, because there's been super teams throughout history. You can go as far back as the 60s with some of the Celtics teams that Bill Russell had. The Magic and Lakers of the 80s were definitely super teams. Of course, my own Boston Celtics from 2008 were a super team, so super teams existed before LeBron James. You can't make a mistake about that. Now, what didn't exist before LeBron James was superstar players just completely taking control of their career to go play with other superstar players while they were still at a relatively young age. Of course, you had the Lakers. That's a team that's always brought up back in 2004 where they had Gary Payton and Karl Malone. And while they could still play some decent basketball, of course, this was basically at the end of their career, so it really wasn't the same thing as what LeBron James did in 2010. So what you had in 2010 was 3 players all under the age of 30 who were all top 5 at their position coming to join forces because they were tired of their current situations. And of course, a lot of people got mad at LeBron James for doing that, but when you look back, it was pretty well justified because at the time LeBron was playing on a Cavaliers team that clearly couldn't lure anybody, whether it's because nobody wanted to play in Cleveland or the timing just wasn't right with free agents. Nobody was coming to help LeBron James as a superstar, and he had to go against the Boston Celtics, and in 08 they were rolling deep. Not only did they have a big 3, but they had a full bench behind that too. So after a couple of years of losing to that same roster, it kind of made sense when LeBron was like, alright, the big 3 in Boston probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon, which they actually didn't separate up until 2012, so it kind of made sense for LeBron to say, let me go grab a couple of players that can help me defeat them, because Cleveland's not going to do it. And even if you're not willing to go deep into NBA history, that alone right there should tell you that LeBron didn't actually start the super team trend, because he went and made a super team to actually beat a super team in Boston. Now, on that note, I can't really understand why we're sitting here 7 years later after the inception of the Miami Heat, and people are trying to deny that that was ever a super team. Now, on my part, like I said, I'm looking at this unbiased. There's no shame in it. You made one to beat one. You did what you had to do. But I distinctively remember living through that time in 2010, and I remember when LeBron James said he was going to South Beach, and not only did that leave me my jaw just hit the floor, because at the time, again, if you were around to see LeBron, Dwayne, and Chris back in 2010, which I know a lot of people weren't because I have a feeling that nobody was really paying attention to Chris Bosh before he was on the Miami Heat. Those were 3 amazing players, and we hadn't seen 3 amazing players like that just make a plan to join forces all in one summer. And the thing is, everyone around them, including them, knew how good they were. They had a party that said, yes, we did. And the question I always ask when people say that's not a super team is, yes, we did what? Yes, we did just bringing together 3 okay players? No, that was a huge party because they knew the type of talent they just joined together. I remember specifically, without even pulling up the footage, LeBron saying that they were going to be so good that Pat Riley could play point guard for him. Of course, there was the exaggerated ring count where he said he was going to win something like 8 championships. Of course, we all knew it wasn't going to be 8, but we all got his point. You know, they were supposed to win a lot. And looking back at it all these years later, to me, you can't say that you weren't a part of a super team when you had a party talking about how great the talent you just put together was. Like, that's not a good look. But then there's more I want to say about that. Obviously, it kind of matters more what happened after they got together than before it, because nobody really knew how it was going to work out. There was this whole thing about who takes the last shot, are you guys going to be deferring too much, and that obviously ended up being the problem, because when they got to the finals, Dwayne Wade was the man. LeBron hadn't stepped up into that role and just taken over the team yet, so that was something that actually did haunt them. But the thing that people now look back at and say is, look, the Miami Heat, of course, when they got together, we thought it was going to be something else. A lot of us thought it was going to be 3 or 4 straight championships, and it only turned into 2. Then they look back and say this was a washed up Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh didn't step up into the role that people thought he was going to be. Those are the 2 common things that I see in the year 2017 about this Miami Heat team. And that's another reason I wanted to talk about this, because I know as time passes, a lot of people's memory gets distorted, people hear things, they start to forget things. And one thing you have to understand is Dwayne Wade was not washed up at the time that LeBron James joined him. From what I can remember, Dwayne Wade didn't actually have a knee surgery until after they defeated the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2012. And when you look at his first 3 seasons, or the 3 out of the 4 seasons that they played together, his averages were actually 23 points, 5 assists, 5.5 rebounds, and he was shooting 50% from the field. Alright, those aren't stats of a washed up player, I don't care what you say. And yes, he did miss some games during that time. One thing that might be misleading to people who didn't actually watch back then was that it says he only played 49 games in 2012. You have to remember that was a lockout season in which I believe there was only 66 games. That's still a fair amount of games to miss, but it's not 49 out of 82 like somebody looking back would think. So I would say in 2011, he was definitely still Dwayne Wade, and then I would look around 2012, around that year, to say he started to slow down, and then when you get to the 13-14 season, that's the only time I would even consider calling Dwayne Wade actually washed up. And then you get to Chris Bosh, and for some reason there's this really simple basketball concept that people don't seem to understand, is that Bosh was not going to put up his regular double-double numbers on this Miami Heat team because he was asked to do something else for them. I've said this before, so I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on it. You know, he was asked to be a catch-and-shoot player, pretty much like Kevin Love is now. Of course, it wasn't as frequently at the three-point line because Kevin Love was a better three-point shooter, but he was asked to spread the floor for LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, and that's what he did in the offense. So there was no more banging down low and doing all the things he used to do in Toronto, and that's why I think he's a very underrated, underappreciated, and really forgotten star because people weren't watching him in Toronto. Toronto was not really a watchable team while he was there. And then of course there's the thing where people say, well, look at all the stats that LeBron James led them in, and that's one thing I've never denied. LeBron James was the best player when he was in Miami, and he led that team. He got on a team with a couple other stars and he led it. But that doesn't make them less of what they were just because LeBron James was leading in a bunch of stats. When you put talented players together, that's just how it works. Somebody's going to lead, somebody's going to take a massive cut and look significantly worse than they actually are, and for talented teams like that to work, that's just kind of how it goes. That's pretty much along the lines of what Kevin Durant said about Draymond Green in the press conference after the championship, is that Draymond Green is probably never going to score that much again, but they're going to keep winning because that's just the role now. So I'll kind of say 2 things to speak to this. For one, was Miami as super as we all thought they were going to be when they first got together and had that party? Definitely not, because at that time Dwayne Wade was still an MVP candidate, and we all assumed that Dwayne Wade was going to be the MVP candidate that he was for probably like the next 4 years. Of course his knees and his body didn't support him, but that's what it looked like back then. And again, we hadn't seen 3 players like that join forces all in one summer, so we didn't know how it was going to work yet. And I think that's the thought process that hurt Chris Bosh the most because, for the fact that we hadn't seen players like that together, we just kind of thought, man, LeBron, Dwayne, and Chris are just going to be killing people every night, and we weren't really thinking offensive schemes, and that yeah, Chris Bosh is going to probably have to spread the floor for them so the paint isn't clogged and things of that nature. And the second thing I want to say is I don't understand the process of both sides really when you guys are arguing. I don't understand the side that says he never played for a super team, and I also don't understand the side that blames him for making that super team. The side that says he never played for a super team endlessly diminishes Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. They talked about how they were carried by LeBron James and show all the stats about how he was the best player. And the one stat that bothers me the most is they say that LeBron James joined the 45-win team, and to me that's kind of irrelevant to bring up because the 45-win Miami Heat was the one that Dwayne Wade was carrying that did not have Chris Bosh on it. Again, it's been 7 years and time distorts memory. Maybe you guys forgot, but Chris Bosh signed with the Miami Heat before LeBron James did, whether it was a week or a couple of days. That happened before, and they were shedding a lot of those players from that 45-win team. Therefore, saying LeBron James joined a 45-win team is just kind of a shock value thing, especially when compared to what Kevin Durant did, basically to say that LeBron went to a sorry team and made something out of nothing when that's really not the case. And for the side that knows he played with a lot of talent and they endlessly bash him for it, at that time I just kind of asked, well, what would you guys have done? Would you have just sat there and lost to the Celtics for the next 2-3 years because nobody was coming to Cleveland? And at that time the second best player on that roster was, I guess, Mo Williams, Antoine Jameson, 100-year-old Shaq. And then you look at Boston side, they had Rondo before his career went to hell, and KG, Ray Allen, Pierce. They even added Rasheed Wallace, who took a long time to get into shape that season, but it ended up kind of working out. Bench support with Tony Allen, Nate Robinson, that was a squad right there, so he had to do something and he did it. And of course, now that we're in 2017, the super team talk always goes to what's happening now with the Golden State Warriors. And obviously there's differences between what Kevin Durant and LeBron James did. As a matter of fact, I pretty much have an entire video out about that, so I'm not just going to recite everything from there. But yeah, the 2011 Miami Heat, even though they weren't the 45-win team that people are painting them to be, the team still needed work, and they gradually got better over time. I would say their best team was probably the 2013 Heat, but in 2011 they had like Eric Dampier, Joel Anthony, Eddie House, Mike Bibby. Yeah, it was looking rough around those three, so it took time to really build up to what they were going to be. So even though there was 3 top 10 players on that team, there obviously wasn't something like the Warriors where there's already a superstar and 2 all-stars and just good support around there. It was nothing like that, obviously. And that's the point I touched on a couple of videos ago, where I said Kevin Durant really just took what LeBron James did and did it better. And what I mean by that is, he took the idea of being pretty much a top 3 player in the NBA at the time and just taking complete control of your career. You say screw what everybody else thinks, and you give yourself the 100% absolute best chance possible to win an NBA championship. And there's gonna be people mad about it. Believe it or not, the same way that people hate Kevin Durant today, I'm pretty sure you guys already know because some of that still lingers, but people hated LeBron like that in 2010. There was Otis Smith, who was working with the Orlando Magic at the time, who says he thought LeBron was more competitive than that. He had the whole league talking about why would you do this. And the other debate is about whether Cleveland is actually a super team or not, because I see a lot of people who say they are, I see a lot of people who say they aren't. And I think the biggest difference is there is when you look at Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love versus Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, and the Miami Heat squad, they had all kind of done their own things on their own teams before. So Dwayne Wade had won a championship, Chris Bosh had been to the playoffs, LeBron James had been to the conference final, he'd been to the finals actually. So all of these guys have had some kind of success apart from each other. And when he went to Cleveland, you look at it, and although Kevin Love was playing in a tough West with an injured roster, you still say this guy has never won many games in his career, let alone made the playoffs. You look at Kyrie Irving, and he's never made the playoffs either, so it kind of looked like LeBron came and propped them up, as opposed to going to the Miami Heat where they kind of all added something to each other. My thoughts on the Cavaliers are that they have the talent to be called a super team. I think what's missing there is just, I can't look past the fact that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love seem to never be able to do anything without LeBron James, and it's not a talent problem. I'll say that again, Cleveland has the talent to be called a super team, but you see it everywhere. When LeBron James sits out a game, they lose. LeBron sits out a couple of minutes in the NBA Finals, and the plus and minus stat is just horrible without him on the floor. And that's just not what it felt like in Miami, because even when LeBron James sat out in Miami, I think around like the 2013 year, 2012, you still felt like Miami was a threat. Of course, they weren't nearly as good, but I've watched Chris Bosh win a game on his own without Dwayne Wade and LeBron James playing. I've watched Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh win games without LeBron James playing. And before I was ever even a YouTuber back in 2014 when LeBron James went back to Cleveland, I always said this, that I would never fear the Cavaliers the way I feared the Miami Heat. And now I can look back in hindsight and say I was right to make that statement, because for this specific reason, in Cleveland, it's like LeBron, he's the mentor there, he's the king, and he's propping up other stars. In Miami, I just felt like I had seen those guys be their own men, and I just have not seen that in Cleveland yet. So to sum this video up, yes, I believe LeBron James has played on a super team before. I believe it's unfair to penalize him for playing on a super team, because when you look at the guys he's had to go against in the later rounds of the playoffs, like the Celtics and the Spurs and now the Warriors, you kind of need a super team to go up against these guys and to have a good chance to win. I think instead of saying that LeBron James started super teams in the NBA, you can say he started the trend where top players in the NBA think for themselves and think about their career and don't involve anybody else in that thought process. I think you could say that. Because at the end of the day, you had teams like the Celtics and Lakers who made trades for their super teams and they drafted their super teams together. Those were the type of moves. And then you have what LeBron and Kevin Durant have done so far, where they're top players and they say, screw it, I'm either going to go join up with some players and we're going to make our own thing, or I'm going to look at a team that's like one player away from being a super team and I'm going to go there, and that's what it's going to be. It's a terrible trend because it sets off an arms race that's really dangerous for the NBA. It happened with the Miami Heat, where teams looked at them and said, this is how good we have to be to beat them. And as a result, you had attempts at super teams like the Lakers and the Nets. Of course they failed, but that Lakers one could have been very dangerous. And now you have this summer where the Warriors are the team to beat, and I'm not even sure anybody except the Spurs actually has a realistic situation to be able to get as talented or close to as talented as them. And these guys want to win. And so you have players like Damian Lillard, who right now are saying that they're not with the super team thing and they have too much pride, but years of losing changes that. Just ask Kevin Durant, because I saw something he tweeted a long time ago and it goes against where he's at right now. And I'll go ahead and say, a year out from LeBron James's free agency, I know he's not trying to lose to the Warriors for the rest of his career. I don't even doubt that he's thinking about going west. I've seen the rumors and a lot of people have called BS on him. I don't think he's going to the Lakers, but I do think that, maybe he's eyeing a team like the Spurs out in the West and saying, you know what, I don't have anything left to prove, but maybe I shouldn't go back to the NBA Finals every year just to lose to the same team. So in 2018, do not be surprised if you see some crazy shit like LeBron James going to the San Antonio Spurs. He said he loved Popovich. They got a perfect system already set up to compete with with the Warriors. I'm just saying. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed my perspective on the situation. I know these days people either hate LeBron James or they love him. So he's either played on a super team before and he's not competitive, or he's never played on a super team and he's been carrying everybody for his career. Those are pretty much the two perspectives you see right now. So hopefully I shed some light on that with my opinion. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button, comment, and definitely let me know what you think about this. Subscribe and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my future videos. I'm Dom2K and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.